Hey everyone, welcome back. Nick here. I am really excited to have Craig Douglas with us today. Craig, I'm going to say a bunch of nice things about Craig before he introduces himself. I'll actually let him give his own bio, but I'll talk about him first, just in terms of my interactions with him and why I'm excited about this. So, Craig Douglas, South, aka South Narc, Shivworks. Craig is, in my opinion, in the opinion of a lot of folks, one of the top guys in the self-defense world, and that's probably selling him a little bit short. He runs courses for civilians, law enforcement, kind of the whole gamut. In close quarters fighting, weapons, knives, and all that good stuff. So the reason I want to talk to Craig today, because he's been on podcasts and been on videos. If you're a fan of the Warrior Poet Society, you've seen him on John Lovell's stuff. But I wanted to talk to Craig primarily about teaching and coaching. So I'm sure we'll get into some fighting and self-defense stuff. But I am myself, especially, I'm extremely impressed and glad that I've been able to go to some of Craig's classes and experience what that level of coaching and teaching looks like in the self-defense world, because it's actually extremely rare to have somebody who understands fighting at a foundational level, and number one, and then number two is able to convey that information. And here's the important part, to anybody in the class. I've been doing this stuff. I've been teaching and coaching since I was 20. I got into the self-defense world and martial arts world really early on in my adult life, and it almost immediately got into coaching because it's something I've always really enjoyed. And the self-defense world is kind of what got me to starting strength in a lot of ways. So I always appreciate good coaching. I always appreciate great instructors. And in all of the classes that I've taken over the years, and I train a lot, I go to a lot of different training courses. I've been kind of through the whole deal as far as what civilians can do for self-defense and shooting and stuff like that. My gauge, or the way that I personally evaluate an instructor is I look at the who's the weakest performer in the class, or who is the guy who has the least amount of experience and the least natural ability, the least, the guy who you would think maybe this isn't for, right? And then you see what they look like at the end of the course, and how much has that guy improved. And the instructors and the coaches that can produce a significant improvement in people like that, normal people, is a very, very small number of folks, at least in my experience. So again, Craig is one of those guys, and probably in terms of actual self-defense and fighting, because I've been through a lot of stuff. I've taught hundreds of people, if not thousands of people, self-defense in some way or another. And the stuff that you will do at a Shivworks class is usually, at least in my experience and when I've done it, the stuff that you do in a weekend, I would consider, if I were running classes, if I were running a seminar or something, it'd be pretty advanced, and Craig gets you there very efficiently, very efficiently. I mean, you're putting on a helmet and you're operating at a pretty good level, even if you've never done it before. So anyway, Craig, thank you for your time. Thanks for being on here with us. You want to give everybody a brief intro or a brief bio of yourself?
Sure, man. Awesome to be here with you as always, Nick. Thank you for having me on the podcast and introducing me to the starting strength community. So, a little bio of me. He gave them my name, Craig Douglas. I am a retired sheriff's deputy from South Mississippi. I had a 21-year law enforcement career, with most of that being spent in narcotics, SWAT, or both simultaneously. I retired in the year 2011 to do training full time. So this is my 11th year of doing training full time. It's my 20th year of doing training under the brand of Shivworks globally. I teach now in 47 states, 11 countries outside of the U.S., all four branches of the U.S. military, 5 federal law enforcement agencies, and I have a contract within a small section of the intelligence community. I'm best known in the industry for um, black swan, if you will, niche fighting and tactical problems, such as what does a gunfight look like in a clinch or on the ground entangled with a person? What does a solo structure problem look like? Solo structure movement problem look like when there is a high degree of ambiguity and you don't have the resources of a SWAT team? What does a fight with weapons look like in a car, and how does that novel environment change motor skills? So those are the places that I dwell, and they kind of reflect my fairly unusual career track as far as being both a teacher of motor skills and tactics professionally since 1992 to law enforcement primarily, and then some novel assignments I had, including a 2 year undercover stint where all I did for that 2 years was play an addict and a bad guy. And, had several things that happened to me that I didn't have training solutions for. So yeah, that's a hodgepodge of me, and I probably spend at least 40 weeks a year, and have for the past 11 years on the road teaching these ideas and concepts. And, I have 4 open enrollment courses that are available for, pretty much everyone that is interested in self-defense. And then I do bespoke or custom courses for clients like Naval Special Warfare, MARSOC, Army SOF, and I've done work for a couple of special missions units.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah. So, and that's one of the interesting things, because and again, one of the main reasons that I wanted to bring you on, because I could recommend your classes all day, but I want to recommend you specifically as on the coaching aspect and the teaching aspect of things, because in my opinion, Craig, and I think you'll agree with me, or just let me know what you think. But in my opinion, you got guys who have gone through a selection process, who are in a special mission unit or a special operations unit or a SWAT team. Those guys are going to be effective regardless of what you do, right? They're going to be good at their jobs. They're selected because they're able to solve problems, and they're physical specimens generally, right? So they can do things. They can do things well, even with subpar or inefficient or not the best training. But you work with those guys, and you also work with the overweight firearms fanatic who does no fighting. And
I do.
sometimes you have both of those guys in the same class, and everybody does the same thing. And
Yes.
so, if you can, I'd like you to talk a little bit about how, if you think about that stuff, if it's just your perspective on that situation.
Sure. Yeah. Well, and it's when you look at what I do compared to which is, and what I do is I am a traveling road show, and I go to places where probably most everyone there has never met me before. They haven't done my coursework. They may have familiarity with some of the elements of the coursework, and have competency with it, but they haven't put it together in the way that I put it together. So that's the first thing, as far as, you know making sure that everyone is actively engaged, is regardless of someone's familiarity with the firearms portion, or the combat sports portion, or the grappling portion, they haven't assimilated the same way, and it's not specific to you know the way I'm applying it. So from that perspective, everyone is on the same page. They're fairly unique things that I developed, fairly unique tactics, training and protocols for, that are unique and specific to me. This is my take on this topic. And I was the first guy who actually got on the road with all the requisite equipment to do this course, much of which at the time was cost prohibitive or difficult to acquire, and started at least creating a laboratory to analyze best practices for what we commonly think of now as an entangled gunfight. So you know, people may have familiarity with the elements of the coursework, but they haven't put it together and assimilated the whole. And that, as much as anything, is what the coursework is about. We refer to the coursework as interdisciplinary. So I guess a good analogy would be like, and you know, tell Rip not to strike me down for mentioning this, but it would be like, you know, a marathoner, or it would be like a sprinter, a gymnast, and a power lifter that have never done anything outside of their disciplines, all coming into a CrossFit class.
Right.
I think that would probably be the best analog I could make, from a strength and conditioning and exercise standpoint. That yeah, they have pieces of it, but do they understand how it fits together? Do they understand the other components? So in that regard, the curriculum and the installation process keeps everyone engaged, and from that standpoint, everyone can get something out of it, regardless of whether they know how to pummel an underhook or not. They may know
Right.
how to pummel an underhook, but they don't necessarily know how to do that to create a circumstance where the adversary's limbs are away from their waistband and away from yours,
Right.
and that requires drill and attention. So I think from that perspective, everyone, because it's so novel and unique, everyone is engaged.
Right. There's, and this is the way I typically explain it to people when I get asked what we did or what your classes are like, and it's the the main point that pops up in my head is integration. It's integration of all of these different things. There's no secret ninja techniques. There's nothing that you are doing that somebody who has experience with firearms doesn't mostly already know. I mean, other than the retention stuff that's specifically yours. There's nothing that a wrestler hasn't seen before. There's little that a jiu-jitsu guy isn't comfortable with. But
Right.
the gold in this thing is how you integrate it together, and that is a really, I don't know if you understand, but that is a difficult thing to do, and very few people can do that well.
Right.
And it takes an understanding of all of those pieces. So, and that's one of the cool things. It takes an understanding of all of those elements, plus what it actually looks like and feels like to be in those situations, to be able to deliver this information. And again, I want to stress again, not just to guys who can function effectively, to everybody. Everybody. I mean, we had my first EWO Edge Weapons overview. There was a 72-year-old guy,
Yep.
Lindy, I believe was his name. He was awesome.
Yep.
We had a grandmaster shooter at my ECQC class who looked like he had never thrown a punch before in his life, and went through the whole course. But again, everybody benefits from that material, whether they're a high level shooter, high level grappler. The integration portion of it is what you leave, and you leave there
Yeah.
regardless of your experience level with any one or few of those things. You leave there with almost a path forward, because it's so simplified in terms of and simplified is probably the wrong word, but it's delivered so well in terms of if this, then this. These are your two options. You talk about things being binary, right? And you have two options to go to, and a wrestler could look at that and be like, well, I do this or I do this, but they're missing the integration aspect of it as well. You're also having to think about staying on your feet and accessing weapons and all these things. So very, very cool stuff, man. And the integration factor is a big part of what I wanted to talk about. So how did that all come about? Was it trial and error? Was it what's your experience, your background in martial arts and that
Yeah,
stuff?
so it was a very trial and error. So I started doing a deep dive into the idea of deploying a handgun inside of arm's reach, whether someone was vertical or horizontal. So an entanglement is the word we use, a clinch or a ground fight. I started looking at that idea after my 2 year undercover stint, where I had some pretty significant failures of conventional doctrine and conventional techniques regarding what were the best practices for that particular problem. The best practices were an afterthought. They were conducted in environments that didn't resemble the environments those events occurred in. Um, there was no intention, there was no pressure. The targets, were paper targets, and you can do just about anything. So when I had some fairly significant failures uh, of that content, I realized that all of that stuff was fairly vestigial and had never been pressure tested. And this coincided with the development, the early years of the UFC. And if we remember what the contest looked like back then, it was very free form. It was pretty much anything goes. There were only a few rules, and I just remember how that contest kind of turned the martial arts world on its head.
Right.
And we saw for the first time, fairly empirically, what worked and what didn't in a fight, at least one with a few rules. Um, and, we saw the same patterns of success and failure over and over and over. And it really turned a lot of the martial arts, like I said, the martial arts world on its head. Like here's just something off the top of my head. Um, the range denoted commonly in martial arts like Wing Chun or hybrid systems like Jeet Kune Do. The range of trapping, which in theory exists as a range of fighting. However, what we see in pressure and competition is that range is smashed through so quickly that really it doesn't exist unless two people choose
Right.
to hold that range and engage with each other. So, you know, if that's true, what is the relevancy of trapping range and all the accompanying techniques that support that range and work in that range? What's their relevancy? Or okay, we spend a lot of time developing this range, but there's a tiny sliver that's actually available in a fight, and what's the cost benefit analysis and the overall how do I spend my time equation of spending all that time in trapping range for a tiny portion of applicability compared to all the time I could spend getting better at clinch work or range striking or groundwork or whatever. So that was one of the first things that became very apparent was that. So I thought the whole idea of a limited, no holds barred laboratory with weapons and with tactical street or self defense context would be an interesting lens to examine some of my failures that I'd had through.
Yep.
So locally, what I did, because I was an academy instructor too, and had been since '92. Locally, what I did was I kind of put together a local fight club and took this mishmash of protective equipment, motorcycle helmets, the MMA gloves of the day, Glock 17 T guns, which I had access to because I was an academy instructor, and I had a ton of marking cartridges that had been given to me by the Navy.
Mm.
You know, so we started doing this on a weekly basis, and we started going after each other, a bunch of young guys, with really high levels of contact. I mean, these were fights, and we used all that equipment well outside, as you've heard me say, of the manufacturer's recommended
Right.
guidelines for safety. And we could have a debate about whether I should have done that, but everyone was willing and everyone wanted to. It's something we were doing on our own time. And basically that, because in the very beginning, I really didn't have any idea what we were looking at, why some people were successful, why some people weren't. And then so it took some time to observe patterns of success and failure, um, figure out how to describe them with words, and then see, okay, we know that works, and if we can do that, how can we do that consistently? How is it a one of, uh, or are there different ways to get to one thing, and what is that one thing? So I figured some things out then doctrinally that worked consistently, and it was not too long after that I realized there's a lot of good things from combat sports that work to consistently get to these end states that we had figured out organically in Fight Club. And that's what's actually started creating my formalized doctrine of what deploying a pistol within an entanglement looked like versus the traditional mindset of breaking range and getting to the gun, fighting your
Yep.
way out to a distance, and getting to a gun, which can work unless one finds, like I did, that there's no place to go, such as you're fighting inside of the confines of a vehicle within the driver's compartment, during a $40 crack buy, and you've got somebody on top of you. There is nowhere to go, and you cannot lose. How do you solve that problem with weapons? How do you deploy weapons? How do you keep him from deploying weapons? How do you not shoot yourself? So there were a whole bunch of things that had to come together. The retention shooting positions of the day really didn't address, truly, the idea that the support hand is always forward and active ahead of the muzzle, always forward of the muzzle and active, and how, that affected the angle of what you were doing, your ability to protect yourself. Because you'd even see guys on the range do things like, okay, well, we understand that this hand has to be out of the way. So what they do is they draw the gun and bow their hips forward and put this hand up. Yes, it's active and it's sort of out of the muzzle, and the support hand is deconflicted from the muzzle, but the posture is so bad that any forward drive from the adversary would bowl someone over, which again you don't get from a flat piece of paper, a B-27. So, like I said, even the training modalities to support theories back in the 90s were completely inadequate. There was no pressure, there was no opposition, there was no intention, there was no malevolence that you felt in training from somebody trying to kill you, as much as you were trying to kill them or survive. So, I had to figure out ways to replicate that, and fortunately, you know, um, those guys did a really admirable job of just, I mean, risking themselves. And we had some injuries. We
Yeah.
did. There's no doubt. We had a couple of broken ribs, broken nose. One guy got a tooth chipped, I remember. Um, one guy broke his humerus, and again, this was not formal training.
Right.
These were a bunch of guys, a bunch of kids. We were all, I was 30, at the time, so very young. we're all just getting together and willingly doing it.
Yep.
You know?
Yep.
So it was that kind of got me working along to where, okay, that this seems to work consistently, and this is how I teach it. And then probably 2001, I just started interacting online and these topics in self-defense forums, the V bulletin software of the day. This is pre-social media discussion boards, and people would have discussions about close quarter shooting and things like that. And because I had my laboratory, I'm like, that's not going to work. That will work. This is how to do it. Blah blah blah. And people became engaged with me, and I was invited over in '01 to a guy by the name of Paul Gomez, who lived in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, about 2 hours away from me. I was invited over to his house one night. He had a similar local garage training group, and he wanted me to come over and show some of this stuff. So I did. And Paul at the time was an adjunct instructor to a national level training organization called Options for Personal Security. A guy named Andy Stanford ran that company. And Paul told me that, hey, no, that nobody's really doing what you do and the way you do it with what you're doing it with. And it's fairly revolutionary. You should hang a shingle out. Well, I was the second in command of our drug unit at the time. We were getting really beat up on methamphetamine, and I just wasn't interested, And Paul badgered me for like a year and a half, and caught me because I was getting married for the first time, and I was struggling with making the overtime for the wedding that my first wife wanted. It's very lavish, and I was complaining to Paul about not making enough money. Well, Paul seized the moment and he said, hey man, I've been trying to get you to do this for a while. Why don't you let me set up some classes for you? I'll set them up. I'll get people. I'll put the notifications out there. I know you don't know how any of this works, but all you got to do is show up and do your thing. And yeah, it's kind of hard to turn down. I was
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
okay. So I tried it, and I remember the first class, first ECQC class I ran. It was a 1 day class, and I made more money in a day than I ever had. But that wasn't really what grabbed me. What grabbed me was the level of engagement from, and this was an open enrollment class. So these were all just regular people who were enthusiasts, not armed professionals,
Right.
not police officers, soldiers, or security guards, or what have you. And I drove them. It was in Lake Charles, Louisiana in July, and I drove them hard. It was brutally hot. And we did like an 11-hour day. I mean, you've been in my classes, you know what kind of days I run. They're
Right.
long. And ran one 11-hour day, and they were just grinning and smiling and happy. And I was amazed at the passion and the engagement. And I, I just felt really good. So I had another one, and had another one, and had another one. And it went from there. So, after, the first class was '03, I retired in '11. So, after 8 years of, and I hate this word, brand building,
Yeah.
I guess that's what I was doing.
Right.
Um, I was, things were fairly toxic with my agency at the time. I had enough time to retire, and I'm like, I think I can make a living doing this. So I did, and that's been, you know, um, 11 years ago, 12 years ago. I mean, and I haven't looked back, and every year is busier than the previous year. So um,
The amount of
that's how it happened. It happened very organically, and the course, because of my frequency at this point in my tenure, um, has become more and more and more and more polished, and I have become more and more and more polished. Obviously, it's just like anything; you
yeah.
need reps.
Right.
So, um, yeah, that's where we're at today, man. Is that's where the class is at. It's fairly well polished, but I always look, at ways to, you know, take a little bit off here, take a little bit off there. I'm still not satisfied with it. I mean, it's a living body of work,
Right.
and it always will be. So I'm intensely curious, and now because I do have so many accolades and I have so much status within the industry, I'm really nervous about being full of shit.
Yep.
You
That's
know,
a
because it's real easy to buy your own press
yes.
when you're in a position like I am. It's real easy to get comfortable. So
Right.
I worry that more than ever that I know what I'm talking about and I'm doing the right thing.
Yep. Yeah, a couple things. First of all, a lot of our starting strength fans will hear a lot of similarities to the development of your stuff and how starting strength is developed. From the beginning. And the online forum thing. Kind of the pressure test of opinion. People coming up with silly ideas and asking questions, and you having to think about what you do and being able to explain it to somebody on an internet forum, and putting together logical arguments and questioning yourself. That's very, very, very similar. Now, obviously, the stakes are much lower when you're talking about barbell training, but similar. And dude, I mean, I guess I'm a couple years into since I finally signed up for one of your classes, and it's pretty obvious to me that I can see in the undercurrent of all of the development that has even accidentally has gone on over the last however many years. I mean, it's pretty obvious to me, So, and then the fact that you've got more and more, I'm assuming, you've got more and more just normal folks coming to these things.
Oh yeah.
I personally don't think you're in any danger of bullshitting yourself, because the more beginners and just unathletic people you work with, the better your delivery becomes, right? So, and man, I want to talk about a couple points that you brought up. So, the martial arts world, the defensive tactics world, all the breaking range, drawing the gun, retention shooting. These are all outcomes and end states, so to speak, right? That academies and instructors and self-defense instructors are teaching. And and this is the next thing I'd like you to talk about if you can, probably you bring this idea of the operating system, right? Which is essentially a Greco-Roman clinch, and teaching an operating system. In other words, teaching concepts, teaching position, teaching posture with a couple of very simple techniques, if you can call them that, right? Like your underhooks and your duck unders, versus teaching this is how you break contact, this is where you put your arm, and this is how you draw the gun and shoot. The operating system takes into account the fact that you are in a fight. The end state doesn't take into account that you're in a fight, right? So when you teach somebody, a retention shooting position, like an old school style, retention shooting position, you're assuming that the fight is either about to end or you're not even considering it, which is more likely the case, right? So what I'm getting at is that your approach is actually the hard way, right? Because you're not teaching a technique. You are teaching a system of basic posture, position, and movement that you can then layer your own stuff on top of, whatever it is, right? Whether it's your striking or your grappling or your shooting or your knife work. So, yeah, could you talk a little bit about the concept of the operating system?
Sure, absolutely. So when we look at performance in a fight, there are going to be things that invariably weigh heavily in favor of one person or another. And those things are attributes. The the attributes of size, the attributes of strength, the attributes of speed, you know, and I can't I can't change any of those things in a weekend. I can't do that. So the martial arts equation has always been, well, it's about technique, okay, or being technical.
Right.
And they'll parrot things like, well, it's about understanding leverage, and it's about understanding this, and it's about understanding that, which really are all still attributes. They are attributes that are learned versus attributes that one has innately or brings to the table. But look, technique, you know, under an understanding of leverage or balance or posture or position, those are still attributes nonetheless. So what I started realizing was the formulaic technique based, if he does this, you do this, and if he does this to counter it, then you do that to counter it, was incredibly time inefficient,
Right.
and it didn't work well for um short coursework. Okay, and I had already had experience as a police academy instructor in short coursework. Now, short coursework in a police academy is typically 40 hours. Okay. Um, so it's longer than a weekend course. However, usually compared to an open enrollment population, the to be frank, the law enforcement side of the house is is fairly disinterested
Right.
comparatively.
Yep.
So yes, you have more time. You don't have the level of engagement as people who are enthusiastic and are paying out of their pocket.
Right.
You know, so I started looking at how things work, and could I teach the attributes, if you will, of wrestling in short course format, and how do I identify those? And I identified, for my purposes and what I want to accomplish, three of pressure, posture, and position. And I think about those three attributes collectively, specific to wrestling, as a tripod of stability that creates essentially an operating system that allows you to run all of your applications, if you will. So, to put it in computer terms, which most people understand, your operating system runs everything within your PC, your Mac, your lap, whatever you have, and without a healthy, robust operating system, you can't open a spreadsheet, do a Word document, get on the internet, do a PowerPoint, all of which would be applications. You
Right.
know, so using that language, operating system applications, what we have is we have a meta of three attributes that allow you to do things like learn a couple of techniques to be able to retain your gun, a couple of techniques to be able to get to the back. But without a healthy, well running operating system, without understanding pressure, posture, and position, you're not going to be able to retain a handgun. You're not going to be able to stay on your feet long enough to deploy it correctly. You're not going to understand the position you need to be in to, you know, successfully get that gun out and put rounds in him and not put rounds in yourself. And you have to understand how, though all those elements, the firearms work learned on the range and how the wrestling modified specifically for that application, how they coalesce into a consistent end state. And then once we do that, how do you train that? What's the most effective way to train that within a short period of time? And I have figured out, much like the combat sports community has figured out, that gradated modalities of pressure are the best way to do that. And being strategic about when those are introduced, you know, with what content.
Right.
So, but that's the idea of the operating system, is that it's essentially technical fighting specific attributes with specific drills taught to isolate those attributes away from end states or applications, so the student has time to focus on that exclusively. And that's what I've done through a series of drills to get people good pretty quick when that's all they have to focus on. For example, when we teach the idea of pressure, feeling, receiving and giving pressure to someone, and how that affects their posture, by doing what we call the mountain goat drill, where we go forehead to forehead, we put a pad between our heads, because this is kinder, gentler Shivworks, and and we don't want people scuffing their heads up like we used to back in Fight Club. But by disconnecting the limbs and not letting them use their hands, grab, push, pull, or do anything like that, what we force them to do is accomplish the end state of driving someone back, holding their ground, and not being driven, and only using the line from the crown of their head through their C-spine all the way through their back and down to their hips to create a line, a bolstered line of posture that allows them to be able to accomplish an end state. And
Right.
we isolate that away from everything else. And I think if we were, what's a good analog to that? I think so. So I think probably what I've done with wrestling to teach attributes would be if you broke, a split jerk down into very specific components that you got repetition on before you actually completed the movement.
Sure. Right.
I think that'd be a I think that'd be a fairly, rough but accurate analog
Yeah.
to that. I'm
You'll
kind of doing the same thing with wrestling.
Of course, yeah. You'll see a similar deal when whenever you make it to one of our starting strength seminars. You'll see it in the
Yes.
way that we teach the barbell lifts, which I mean they're ultimately not very complicated, but there's a lot to think about. There's a lot to do, and what you're doing is systematizing these relatively complex ideas and movements and positions that if we were to sit here, and which we have, I mean, we just talked about this for about 10 minutes, but when you
Yeah.
when you do the drill, it's there, and you brought up the idea of gradients of pressure, right? So you teach it, you drill it with low pressure, add a little bit of pressure, add another thing on top of that, and then by the end of this 2-day class or 3-day class, you've got it enough to the point that if you continued to drill it, if you continued to practice it, even fairly sporadically, you could develop a pretty damn good clinch over some time, right? So it's just something that in the way that you teach it, you could just grab anybody and drill this stuff and get better at it.
One of the best compliments I had to my curriculum development, my pedagogy, was from Warren Stout, who is a third, I believe he's third now, degree black belt under Renzo Gracie directly. But Warren was also a former Div 1 wrestler, and he did EWO, he did my knife course. And he told me he's a super, super, just very technical, keen observer of training, and loves all kinds of training. But he made the remark. He said, you would have never had me believe that after 2 days of training, non-athletes with no exposure to wrestling would be giving me trouble.
Right.
So,
Right.
if I can do that, if I can take the average person who's not a combat athlete, a soccer mom, a stay-home dad, whatever, okay, and I can have them give a guy like him trouble, I'm okay with that.
Yep.
I'm absolutely okay with that.
Right.
And moreover, hopefully, you know, provide them an experience within the coursework, because the course is two things. It's it's a course of instruction and it's an experience.
Right.
What the experience hopefully does is it creates the need and desire to continue training on their own after they're outside of, my wingspan,
Yep.
and motivate them to do that. Um, so yeah, it's taken a long time to figure that out. And again, I constantly assess the efficiency of what I'm doing.
Yep.
Can I do this better? Am I, kind of like Bruce Lee said, am I bound by my own tradition
Right.
because
Yeah.
I've gotten comfortable with it? Are there better ways? And one of the cool things is I really actively encourage alumni to form training groups and work. And we have a lot of guys who are opening up a training group within like a BJJ school,
Right.
which invariably becomes like the self-defense class for the BJJ schools.
Yep.
What'll happen is they'll start getting combat athletes, but they'll also start getting people who are only interested in self-defense. And now that BJJ school actually has an answer versus, hey, just go do
Right.
Krav Maga. Like we see a lot of combat sports guys will just, abdicate, give up, throw
Yeah.
their hands up, say, yeah, we don't do that. We
Right.
we do competition jiu-jitsu or traditional jiu-jitsu, whatever, and they'll throw their hands up in it. Now they have a solution. So now those people are getting brand new people in. So they will feed things back. And I give people, who I, say, hey, you have my blessing to do this because I think you're confident enough to do it. They'll feed things up to me still every day. Sean Luca, right now is experimenting with, you know, teaching people efficient ground fighting and maneuver with minimal instruction or without the traditional trappings of Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, which we consider to be the most effective ground fighting there is, and more importantly, the most effective teaching modality,
Right.
right? So
What?
that's been Sean's been working on that, and just seeing what people do, giving them end states without instruction.
Right. Which Craig isn't saying much because the way jujitsu is taught generally is atrocious.
Awful.
It's
It's
show
awful.
it's show and tell, and there's zero time spent on what actually matters. Position and base and movement, where to put your hands, where to put your feet, and people hold the black belt in such high regard, which is true in terms of being a practitioner, but says absolutely zero about coaching ability and the ability to actually instruct. And unfortunately, and this is both a good sign and a bad sign, but jiu-jitsu has just exploded, and people who stick around long enough get better on accident, just because they're, like you
I
said,
agree.
because they're constantly put under pressure every single day. But jujitsu, people could move through a jujitsu, let's say a path in terms of zero to proficiency so much faster if there were instructors out there looking at things in a more at a more fundamental level, at a more basic level about what do you actually have to know to be able to fight in these positions, and it's not how to do a triangle choke from guard. That's not how you do it, right? It's how do you get there? How do you get there under pressure, right?
I suspect John Danaher is probably, and I say this without ever having received any instruction from him, but I suspect he's kind of doing that with jujitsu when you look at, how quickly his people progress. Now, granted, the guys for the competition team, I'm sure, are hand selected and
Sure.
things like that.
Right.
There's something, there's no doubt there's something to the way that Danaher is, there's something to Danaher's taxonomy with his jujitsu
Yep.
and how he's installing that.
Yep.
I believe.
Yeah,
I believe.
we just need more thinkers. More people who are considering
Yeah, I agree.
what they're doing every day in classes, and not just I'm going to go teach jujitsu. I'm going to go teach these people how to actually do this. Not just a bunch of techniques. But again, this is the exact conversation we had at the beginning, because it applies to jujitsu as well. It applies to anything.
It
It's
does.
the people who are actually coaching and teaching well, who think about not only what it is they're teaching, but how they're teaching it, are extremely rare. I've got one more thing. I don't want to take up too much more of your time.
No,
Okay, good. The,
good.
just the concept of, because a while a bit ago you're talking about the fight club and testing, and putting equipment on, getting the guns out, and just hammering each other and seeing what comes out of it. You can still do that, and I know guys who've done this. You can still do that and still arrive at the wrong conclusions, right? You can still arrive at the wrong, um, still feed into your own bullshit, and at the end not have what you have developed here. So I think that it takes, this is kind of the next big concept I'd like to discuss, is it takes somebody who is outside of all of these things. I mean, you're not what we would consider a gun guy. You're not what we would consider
Yeah,
a wrestling guy. We would not what we would consider a jiu-jitsu guy. You have a high level of proficiency in all these things, but relatively an outsider, right, from all these things. And the people who can do this and integrate it, and this applies, I personally believe this applies to everything everywhere. One of the reasons that things are so fucked up everywhere right now is because we become so specialized, and people hold the specialist in such high regard, and the
right.
specialist is unable generally to look outside of what it is that they do. Um, and 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 that's good in some ways, but in terms of something that needs to be taught or that needs to be looked at critically, you need the outsider. You need somebody who can take a big step back and say, hold on, this isn't right. This is probably, let's figure out a better way. If that's all you got. You got any thoughts on that?
No, I think your point's well made. And on that note, I did not grow up wrestling. I grew up in the
Me
deep
either.
South.
Right.
So, I came into wrestling in my early 30s,
Right.
way past, any, career or anything in wrestling, and put a lot of time into it, obviously. But same thing, um, I was always a good shooter, but I was never like the gun guy. And I think just having no particular loyalty,
Right. Yeah.
and to be quite frank, loyalty to martial arts damn near cost me my life.
Yep.
So, and it didn't, but I was heavily invested in a lot of fairly silly martial arts, that worked within the training environment and even worked within, limited context of the real world.
Right.
I had just enough success in fairly minor events, and even a couple of major ones, that I kind of thought I knew what I was doing and knew what I was about. And when I went, like I said, that 2 years of UC work where things just radically changed. I didn't really know how bad it could get, until, a couple of those events, which I talk about in live coursework. I usually don't talk about online.
Right.
Um, but because I don't want that to be the focus of things,
Yep.
but still in all, um, I got enough bad experience in that 2 years, for me to take literally what I'd done most of my life, all of my life, because I'd been a martial artist like since I was a kid, since childhood. That's what I did. And I did all kinds of martial arts. I did every cutting edge, trendy, secret garage martial art,
Yeah.
and they were a huge part of my identity. And I discarded pretty much most of them.
Right.
I might have kept 10%,
Yep.
you know. Um, and that had been a slow burn from 90 to 96 when I actually came on the job, in the 6 years I had prior to the undercover stint from 96 to 98. But still in all, that 2 years was the linchpin that I said, yeah, that didn't work.
Yep.
That literally almost got me killed. Literally almost
Yep.
got me killed.
Yeah.
So I think having the experiences, more than one that I had, they were so visceral and impactful that I just became loyal to nothing but the truth. I don't care how I got there. It didn't matter to me. I don't care where I drew from. So I think having that, along with a fairly well developed, at that time for my age, a fairly well developed and practiced instructor's eye, and just being willing with this group to do what I did and have the equipment, it just formed this very unique synergy that allowed me to come up with what I've come up with.
Yep.
So I think that's a big part of it right there. Yes, people could put on, helmets and T-guns and things like that, and come to the wrong conclusions, or they could come. Here's the other thing too, they could come to different conclusions depending on how they do the training.
Of course.
Right.
Right.
Because it can be alive, to use straight blast gym language. It could have intention, and it could be it could have opposition. But if it's just two jujitsu guys going after each other as hard as they can, nobody ever gets punched.
Yep.
Or if it's two MMA guys, nobody ever pulls a knife.
Right.
Or you don't send a second guy in there.
Yep.
And those are the things that I learned the hard way, that reality slapped me in the face with, that again are rarely introduced in a training environment. Because let's face it, most martial arts exist to, propagate themselves.
Yep.
It's a commercial venture. It's a living. There's nothing wrong with making a living, okay? But when we're talking about something as chaotic as a life or death entangled close range event in a novel space like a car or an aircraft, those are those are events that hardly anyone trains for,
Right.
or has any idea even what they look like.
Yep.
you know
Yeah.
so I don't know anyone in the industry that's been robbed more than me. And I pretty much know everybody in the industry. Now, is that a bragging point? No, but I mean, I was robbed 9 times in two
Right.
years.
Yeah.
I know what a robbery looks like. And I'm not saying my knowledge is unique, because there are a lot of, guys who did UC work just like I did that do have that knowledge and have, frankly, even worse experiences than me. But do they teach? Do they care about teaching? And if they do, are they good teachers? And can they draw and develop curriculum that works for everybody from their experiences? So I think between the novelty of the UC assignment and the things that happened, and also me being a lifelong martial artist and teacher of motor skills and tactics, literally since I was a teenager, whether that was in martial arts classes before I went in the Army, whether that was as a DT instructor in law enforcement in an academy environment, whether that was in service training, whether that was some civilian self-defense. I had a fairly, again, for my age, when I started examining this problem, I had a fairly tuned instructor's eye.
Yep.
And I certainly, made every mistake you can make, as an instructor of all that stuff. I've made, I mean, a lot of people now, when they have me on a podcast or talk to me, they just assume, I was formed. No. And I was like, no, actually, I can look back 30 years ago and see, wow, I was a fairly shitty
Yeah.
instructor at
It's
one time.
embarrassing to think of what the things
I was a
that
fairly shit.
yeah.
I was a
Yeah.
fairly shitty instructor.
Right.
I didn't teach well. I taught for the wrong reasons.
Yep.
That's a big part of it too. As you've heard me say, I think there are a lot of people in this business that are far more interested in being somebody versus doing something.
Right.
I don't see as much selflessness in the industry as I would like to see. And everybody operates out of their own self-interest, but still, this is very much, this is as much vocation as it is profession to
Yes.
me, and it still defines me because I know the stakes of what if I'm wrong, and I understand those very personally.
Right.
So, yeah, I think I think you're right. I think that maybe I was in a unique position with a lot of different elements that allowed this to come about, and I've tried to be a good steward of this too by supporting other guys who have legitimate pedigrees that are developing their own take on this, even if it's different than mine.
Right. Yeah.
I think that's super important. I think that's because there's still, I mean, only a handful of us, and for years, almost 2 decades, I was the only guy occupying the space.
Yep.
So when John Valentine or Cliff Byerly or Ben Aubin or Fletch Fuller or any one of my guys, Cecil Burge, Paul Sharp, Larry Lindemann, Chris Fry, when any one of those guys want to kind of diverge away, and it's hard to get my guys to, right, because they have so much confidence in me.
Yep.
and content, and they've seen it so much. It's like, well, if this is ever going to be a legitimate field of study and not just Craig's cult of personality,
Right. Yeah.
there need to be more eyes on it, and there need to be more people besides me taking a critical look at it. So
Yep.
that's what I would hope, because nobody lives forever, and everybody's work gets surpassed at some point.
Yep.
And I understand that. So
Right.
that's what I would want to see.
Yep.
Definitely.
Yeah, man. Excellent stuff. The point about what this looks like in the future, because we're at a point now where people are seeing what you do, seeing what the folks you've surrounded yourself do, and you know that you're getting somewhere when you're starting to get people doing it bad, right? You get like, you probably go on Instagram every day and see somebody trying to teach essentially your material or elements of your material, and it's done badly. And while that it probably drives you insane or whatever, it drives some of your fans insane. You might not care, but um, that's actually a good sign, right? Because you're getting somewhere. It's resonating with people.
Yeah, and I don't. Here's the thing, man. I am comfortable enough. I'm fairly open source
Right.
when it comes to my content. I mean, there is plenty of video. I mean, hell, most of the course with me teaching it is online
It
somewhere.
is right. Yep. Yep.
I mean, the words I use, most of the drills, me explaining the drills.
Right.
I'm fairly open source about it. And here's my take. From that standpoint, if you can out me, then you should have the work and you
That's
should
right.
have the play.
That's right.
I'm not worried about somebody doing me better than me. So yeah, it doesn't really bother me, man. And honestly, that's people that do that really are honestly doing a disservice to
Yep.
themselves. Okay, because the only way you're going to out me is if you're a better you. And the only way to be a better you is to do the comparable work that
Exactly.
I've done,
Exactly. Right.
right?
Right.
And if you do that, you very well may do better than I do.
Yep.
And that's awesome.
Yep.
So, at the end of the day, when people shortcut, you know, their own process in developing as an instructor or developing a curriculum, you know, um, they're just they're only shortchanging themselves as to
That's right.
what they could be.
Yeah, you can't discount the. There's a concept which I first heard or read from Scott Adams. I don't know if you know who he is. He's the the wrote Win Bigly, and I think he's Dilbert,
Yep.
right? But the
Yep.
concept of a talent stack, which is the summation of all your experience and all of the things that you do well, and you cannot discount that when you're looking at who is using your material and who's teaching your material and who's coming up, and then also with guys like you, guys like Rip who have put something of this caliber together, like Starting Strength or like Shivworks.
Yep.
Nobody will be able to replicate it. It'll evolve. It'll get maybe better. Maybe it'll stay the same. It'll spread, but you know, uh, you guys at this moment in time are the result of a bunch of experiences and education and the way that you've applied those things, and that won't be replicated. So I guess my point is that it's very special in that way, and it's very cool that you're confident enough that you're okay with it spreading and getting and turning into whatever it's going to turn into, right?
100%. Well, one of the things that makes Starting Strength what it is, how old is Rip?
60, how old's Rip? 64, somewhere in there, mid 60s.
So he's 10 years older than me. He's 64. One of the reasons that Starting Strength is what it is because Starting Strength really is right now 64 years of authentic repertoire.
Right, exactly. Yep.
And if you want something and you want to build something, you have to be your authentic self, warts and all, and you have to build that over time.
Right.
There are no shortcuts to this.
That's right.
And that's whatever Starting Strength is, it has 64 years of Rip's life
Right.
in it,
Yep.
all of it.
Yep.
All of it. It is authentic, warts and all, flaws and all, accolades and all. It is authentic,
Right.
right? And that's the thing, man. When you don't do your own work and your own research and you borrow, and it's fine to borrow, just acknowledge where you borrow things from,
Exactly.
and you know if you don't want to do the work, to do something authentic, then acknowledge
Yep.
that. Say, hey, you know, I'm teaching starting strength, and I don't think I can come up with anything better, and I believe in it.
Right.
Okay,
Yep.
okay, you know, and if that's the case, well, you probably should pay Rip a little bit of money.
Right.
I mean, right? I mean,
At least buy a book,
seriously,
right? Yeah, whatever.
hey man, spread the word, give us our accolades, and at some point, Rip's not going to be able to fucking do this anymore.
Right.
And you probably, if you love doing this, and it's Rip's giving you a gift, and you need to give back.
Yep.
So that's the thing, man. So yeah, I don't worry about that. And here's the thing. I mean, I'm still very curious about it. I'm still very curious
Right, right,
if
yeah.
and I know somebody will where this is going to go next.
Yep.
Where it's going to go next. We're just now in the past 5 years or so getting people outside of the collective like doing their own thing and trying to figure this stuff out. And it's still only a handful. It's still only a handful.
Right.
So there's so much room for growth, and it's so exciting to think about where we're at now and where this can possibly go.
Absolutely.
And I hope I'm around. Maybe somebody will wheel me in, drilling all over myself. Everybody's like, hey, this is where it started. You know, I'll I'll shed my pants. You're like, all right, let's get you out of here.
You'll get a clinch
so we
pick
can
out and
train.
like,
No. And and they could go do better than what I ever did.
Right,
So yeah,
right.
that's my hopes for it, man. It's
the,
I'm in a
the,
good place. I'm in a good place. I love what I do.
Mhm.
The people are amazing,
Right.
and they've given me the gift of not suffering in employment.
Yes.
As you
Right.
heard me say, and that's a huge gift. I am allowed to do what I love doing and pay my bills and make a living at it.
Yep. Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
The good news, man, is that this is the hard way. What you do, and in a lot of ways, what we do here at Starting Strength is the hard way. So it's not easily replicated. So
Yeah.
the chances of it getting silly are pretty low. Just a couple final thoughts from me. Look, and we didn't even talk. We didn't even talk about probably the most important thing that we learn at one of your classes, which is the managing the unknown context thing. There's tons of information on that, and everybody, if you're serious about self-defense, if you're serious about using a weapon, a firearm, a knife, as a self-defense tool, you should absolutely seek out Craig and take his class. The guy's all over the place. He travels all the time. If you're within 6 hours of me and I don't have a scheduling conflict, I'm gonna try my damn best to be there.
100%.
So yeah, fantastic stuff. Managing unknown context is just it's again it's stuff that when we do it, we all kind of know it, but again, the way it's presented, the way you structure it, the way the actionable things that you teach are just phenomenal there, man. But anything else we should know, or our fans should know, where to find you, how to get in contact, all that stuff.
Sure. So I'm on Instagram as at Southnarc, SOUTHNARC. That's kind of my personal professional thing. So it's this weird mix of fighting in cars, high end beef, cocktails,
And a lot of
um,
metrosexual stuff
a
with
lot
clothes.
of hashtag menswear, guns, all the shit that I like
Yep.
under one roof. You know, um, yes, you can run me down there. Shivworks.com is the website, which is where the training schedule is posted. I am going to be releasing the rest of the year here within the next 2 weeks as far as the training schedule. So that will be up and live. I know everybody's been, when are you going to release the rest of the year? You've only got up until the beginning of June. So it's coming. It's coming. And that's really it. I think that's as far as running me down, as far as other things your audience needs to know. I don't know. I like doing podcasts just because it gives people an opportunity to, hear what I love long form conversation, and it
Yep.
gives people an opportunity to hear what a person looks like, how they speak, what
Right.
they say.
Right.
I like the way that guy speaks. I like what he has to say. He's interesting. That guy's a dick. I hope he never goes back on, and I hope Nick, never associates with that dude again. Whatever. But I think the only thing would be if people are interested in learning more about this and what I do, ask you, send questions. I'll be happy to come back because we could go down all kind of rabbit
Right.
holes
Yeah.
as far as training and tactics and things like that. How does that relate, to strength and conditioning?
Yeah.
I
That'd be a
think
good conversation to have.
that would be a great discussion. Um my experience with powerlifting, learning in my 40s, under Richard Hawthorne. So yeah, I mean they're all kind of ways we can go. So I guess, hey, gauge the audience, and if they like this and there's good engagement, dude, you know me. If you ask, I'll do it.
Yep.
So I'm more than happy to come back because you're my
Awesome.
guy.
Thanks, man. Yeah, look, go train with Craig. It's simultaneously probably the scariest thing you'll do if you, unless you've been in combat or something like that. If you're a regular guy and you train a little bit, I go to your classes and I'm legit nervous. And at ECQC I ended up having to fight fucking John Wellborn. One of these days I'll put a video together of that. That was an interesting experience.
That was great.
But it's simultaneously the kind of for a lot of people it's probably, I mean, you can see the faces, right, when we're doing the evolutions, and you can see like that guy's fucking terrified right now, and then they do it and it's like they're, and like you always say, you're half the time you're kind of successful, half the time you get your ass kicked, but you definitely learn something from it. But here's the cool thing, man. There is never, at least in my experience, there's never an asshole at a Shivworks class.
No, and I think the only thing I'd probably leave your audience with is this. You know, what is a Shivworks class? It is a very public exercise in extreme vulnerability
Yes,
around people you don't know.
right.
And I don't care what I'm teaching, that's what it is. And it takes a special kind of person to want that and want what comes out of it. So that's what it is. And like you noted, um, everyone, everyone will have the wheels come off. That's
Right.
what I'm known for. Even like plenty of, savvy commandos with all kind of experience. Um, I can make the wheels come off, and that is what I do.
Yep. Yep.
Yep. It's not a real fight, but it's an honest experience.
That's right. Yep. All right. Should we leave it there, Craig?
Absolutely, man.
Thanks a lot, man. I appreciate the time.
Absolutely,
Great
man.
conversation.
Thank you, Nick. Always time well spent, sir.
Awesome.